Hope Troll also posted this, my working theory. In the ransom letter, multiple times letters are written oddly to make them resemble the following letters: J, S, G, H, and I or L. Examples: A's are written to look like S's, and when there is a G, he writes the adjacent letters like they are J and S. Specifically, some instances of daughter, money, and percent also seem peculiar. Others mention that he tried to make J's of other letters. I am theorizing that John Stephen Gygax, Helgoth, and Lorraine Lawrence were involved in the original drafting of the ransom letter, and that these strange letters were a way for them to sign the ransom letter. I think Lawrence and Helgoth were vulnerable people. Drugs may have been used to lure them into this crime. Additionally, they may not have realized that the killer was serious about committing this crime. That's an interesting point, too, because if there was some... That's a very interesting point that nobody talks about. Because if in this circle of criminals there's talk of something, and they didn't even think the other parties would go through with it, and then when it actually happened, then they became liabilities, not that they knew and actively participated. Let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies or any kind of logical fallacies here. 1. Patsy might have been the original target. In the ransom letter, if daughter were replaced by wife, the rest of the letter still works. If the conspirators planned the money-motivated kidnap in November, the original target might have been Patsy. That plan might have been abandoned because they didn't know when John would be home. He probably traveled a lot for work. Perhaps once their focus shifted to Jonbenet, Lorraine let it be known that she would not allow it. That might be why she was killed or why the plan was delayed. For the ransom to succeed, the intruders would have to collect the ransom and get away with the crime. For them to get the money, John would have to be home. Christmas night was the night of the year that John was most likely to be home. Geraldine Vodica Sr., Lorraine's mother, had worked for the Ramseys but was let go in 1995. She may have had a thank you card from Patsy which supplied the intruders with a sample of Patsy's handwriting. The original draft of the ransom letter might have been written to mimic Patsy's handwriting. Another user here mentioned that the percent in the ransom letter is written how some Spanish and Portuguese teachers write it. The early draft of the letter may have been written by a Hispanic woman. Although she may have tried to mimic Patsy's handwriting, she might not have thought to change how she wrote a percent. The killer copied and recopied that note to speed up his copying ability. He didn't have to figure out how to mimic Patsy's writing because the draft already did that, but he did have to copy the draft and keep those details while masking his own handwriting. On the third page, after the first few lines, he was no longer copying, and that is why we see more of his natural handwriting. He may have murdered Lorraine to eliminate a connection to the Ramseys, and so he wouldn't have to pay her a share of the ransom. While her suspicious death was being investigated, he would not have attempted this crime. Once the investigation into her death ended, he may have relaunched his money-motivated kidnap plot. I don't think Helgoth was there that night. I think his replacement may have locked himself in a closet. After that, there was only one intruder, and that's when Jonbenet got some scratches in. She may have gone for the eyes and gotten a fragment of his eyeglass frames, unknown metal fragment found under her nail. The killer might have stun-gunned her and then moved her to the boiler room. In the boiler room, I think the killer stopped garroting Jonbenet to write his initial on her hand. That might have been when she came to. I know it's insane, but the whole thing is insane, and he likes to tag things. The killer may have blamed Helgoth for not being there that night. Since Helgoth served in the army, it is less likely he would have locked himself in a closet. The guy in the closet used his knife to slash the inside. Time passed, he heard Jonbenet scream, then he heard the metal grate bang down and realized he needed to free himself. So he did. He went looking, saw Jonbenet, tidied her, put her in the wine room, and then threw a blanket over her. He exited through the butler door. That is how he came in. He could not fit through the window grate. He is shorter and stockier. The killer let him in after the killer entered through the window grate. Helgoth's replacement could have gone to the police and lied and said he had no idea what the plan was, but he may have felt shame for messing up the plan. Alternatively, he may have feared the killer. Probably the killer and Helgoth's replacement were there when Helgoth died, otherwise Helgoth might have overpowered one of them. They are both implicated in his murder. Blue Moon Pie mentioned, Reddit user mentioned that Frank Sinatra Jr.'s kidnapper selected Frank Jr. for kidnap because he didn't want to abduct a girl. That kidnapper also tried to minimize the trauma for the Sinatras, whereas Jonbenet's killer targeted a little girl and attempted to maximize the Ramsey's trauma. Although I call this my current working theory, really is just an extension of the Smith-Mills-Tracy theory. Interesting. Is this really how it all ties together? An add-on here regarding the Sinatra kidnapping. Afterwards, the abductor lied and said it was a hoax publicity stunt orchestrated by the Sinatras, but some people believed it for decades. If the original plan was to abduct Patsy, mimicking her handwriting in the ransom note was ingenious. If John didn't call the police and paid the ransom and Patsy was returned unharmed a little while later, the only evidence might be that ransom note. The abductor's plan might have been to do the same thing and say that Patsy was in on it and was seeking some notoriety. The person who was smart enough to come up with that plan either wasn't in the house that night or was on meth the night of the murder. Only two options according to this theory. Edit was thinking about the SAS shoe print in the train room wall and the wine room, so I have revised the theory slightly. Once the killer exits, his accomplice, still trapped in the closet, phones a friend. The friend, wearing little black SAS shoes, comes in through the train room window and frees him from the closet. Then they tidy Jonbenet and put her in the wine room. His female helper exits first through the train room window in case the alarm will be set off. He then exits through the butler pantry door because he cannot fit through the window grate. Another interesting follow-up by Hope Troll here. When Jonbenet screamed, her parents couldn't hear that, but he didn't know that. See, this is also interesting. I don't know if enough time is spent talking about this. As far as he knew, her parents were running down the stairs with a gun. Once she is dead, he wants to get out of there as fast as possible. He has just murdered a rich man's daughter. Lou Smith did not believe the DNA was from a factory worker. The DNA in her underwear matched the DNA under her fingernails and the touch DNA on the sides of her pants. It is impossible that it came from a factory worker. Plus, factory workers are Asian women, and the DNA is for a Hispanic or Caucasian male. I actually don't know the source here that the DNA from the underwear matched the DNA profile under the fingernails. Anybody else have a source for that? There's no source listed here. And that's, of course, if it was Jonbenet Ramsey who screamed. Some people believe it was Patsy who screamed, either discovering the body or for another reason. But if it was Jonbenet, the perpetrator would probably assume that everybody in the house would hear her because he didn't know the exact layout and logistics of the audio in the house to hear a scream. So that's an interesting point. So if there was no actual plan to kill her, but then she screamed, and then they panicked and possibly killed her, if the intruder theory has merit. I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. This is MINDSHOCK. Now, the detractors of this theory point to John Kennedy and suspicions that he was just trying to make money by phoning in an acquaintance as a suspect. An interesting post from over 5 years ago now in the Jonbenet subreddit by Sam Candy. This is something I've also pondered about, yet you are the only other person I've come across who has written about being curious about this. I think it is pretty clear it was one of the intruders who was present at Jonbenet's murder who set up Helgoth as the murderer. In my opinion, they knew about the stun gun because they were there when it was used. And in my opinion, they knew about the boot print because it was leaked to them via someone who had close ties to the Boulder Police Department. So here are my timelines. 1. Stun gun. February 4th, 97, Helgoth's suicide, in quotations. BPD crime scene photos taken of his body and room. According to Shapiro, the police crime scene photos show a pair of high-tech climbing boots by his feet, and a stun gun beside his hand, and a taser in the background. Unknown date, John Kennedy first contacts BPD saying he called 10 to 20 times, but no one called him back. About March 7th, 3 weeks after Helgoth's suicide, Kennedy said he sat down with Boulder detective Jane Harmer, one of the cops investigating Jonbenet's murder. She took my information and never contacted me again, said Kennedy. April 9th, while looking again at autopsy photos, Smith notices unusual marks on body, suspects they were made by a stun gun. 2. Boot print. Fleet White knew about the high-tech boot print in early January 97. The public did not learn about the high-tech boot print until Beckner took charge in November 97, when an investigation into the footwear began. Helen Misserlou posted this. Here's one drawing board doodle. Because everything about this murder mystery is half clever and half idiotic, or so dumb it's brilliant. So dumb it's brilliant. That's an interesting way of looking at it. What if it really was suicide out of remorse, fear, accumulated mental problems? He cannot confess, but he still wants to leave some clues, so he just leaves them strewn around him. And perhaps one more. What about not simply BPD leaks or collaboration? What about a textbook police frame-up? Someone on the force who actually wasn't Ramsey's did it, wants to quickly close the case. He either legitimately believes it was Helgoth or thinks it's just too good of an opportunity to pass up. He over-obviously plants or emphasizes key pieces of evidence familiar to the investigation. The shoes, the stun gun, SBTC, the wrench in the works. However, DNA is found, but it doesn't match. Surely in February they had no results, but was it known that they even had DNA? Again, this is from Reddit. Take this with a grain of salt. Supposedly, someone compared Helgoth's high-tech boot, appearing to be the perfect match, same size, and even had a dent or a chip in the sole in the exact same spot the print in the basement does. Huh. That's interesting. If that's true, that is quite interesting. So that would mean Helgoth was involved, or the person who was involved had the shoes to plant there. Now, there's some serious questions about John Kennedy. So let's look at a few different posts regarding John Kennedy. Some of these going all the way back to 2006 on the Web Sleuths forums. Elsewhere, it is being reported that this week's headlines that Jonbenet's killer was at the funeral. It is further reported, I'm assuming this is National Enquirer, it is further reported that John Kennedy turned up at Patsy's funeral, but was turned away by Pam Powell. For those who don't know, John Kennedy is a Boulderite whose friend Michael Helgoth committed suicide, allegedly, on the day after Hunter's address to the killer. Soon there will be no one left but you. Yeah, actually, I went over that previously. It was the day after this press conference. So, again, curious timing. Some people saw the suicide as significant. John Kennedy subsequently broke into the Helgoth home and allegedly stole a pair of high-tech boots, which he took to Team Ramsey as evidence. He also stole a check and some artwork which had nothing to do with Jonbenet's murder, but which may help define his character a little. Helgoth was investigated, but there was nothing to connect him with the Ramsey case. His DNA was not a match, for example. I'm also not certain if the high-techs were ever proven to be Helgoth's. The inability to connect Michael Helgoth to the Ramsey home didn't stop Michael Tracy from making a documentary naming Helgoth as an accessory. John Kennedy was the star of the documentary about the Ramsey case, and he was alert, articulate as he described the bad man, Mr. X, who had been a friend of Helgoth. Tracy's documentary presented Mr. X as investigators' prime suspect, with Helgoth as accessory. The documentary built a case against Mr. X for midnight burglaries, the murder of little Ali Bareilles, of Jonbenet Ramsey's murder, then suggested that Mr. X murdered Michael Helgoth and that he later was responsible for the Dance West assault. The documentary claimed that Mr. X had disappeared, adding a flare of intrigue to the theory. Alas, it was a crock of fish. The investigators who started the program were Ramsey PIs and not the official investigators, as viewers may have been forgiven for believing, and Mr. X hadn't disappeared at all. In fact, he had been on probation for 4 years after assaulting his wife and had moved to another state in August prior to Jonbenet's murder. He wasn't in Boulder at the time of the murder, or when Helgoth committed suicide, or when the Dance West assault took place. Again, allegedly. Is all he could find a receipt to prove that? I mean, how did they actually prove that? What's more, it later transpired that Team Ramsey knew he hadn't disappeared. Members of this forum tracked him down from an arrest sheet, which Tracy showed on his documentary, and contacted him via his web business within minutes. Mr. X has an unusual name and was running an internet jewelry business. Mr. X's reaction was one of astonishment and outrage. He was so upset that he immediately contacted the Boulder DA's office and demanded a DNA test to clear himself. He was told by the official investigators that he was not a suspect and never had been. So they never did a DNA test? The whole documentary, as it was shown in the UK, was based upon a lie. What's more, the documentary suggested that Mr. X killed Helgoth to stop him talking about the Ramsey murder. This is despite the fact that the sudden death inquiry decided he was a suicide. Another of Helgoth's friends posted here for a while, and he told us that Helgoth had been depressed about the breakup of a relationship, and that is why he killed himself on Valentine's Day, not because of Hunter's speech. At the time of the documentary, several of us asked whether Kennedy had been investigated. He has a long rap sheet for offenses, including child molestation. One of the other doesn't Gygax also, or some kind of crime against a child? One of the other stars of Tracy's documentary is almost certainly a sex offender who is on the failed to registered list. Such was the quality of his witnesses. There certainly are questions about Kennedy. He apparently tried to contact police 10 plus times to report his suspicions about his dead friend Helgoth. Why not before his death? ? Then he comes up with a pair of high-tech boots which he claims belonged to Helgoth. Was this after it was reported in the media about the high-techs? Was it proven the boots did belong to Helgoth? Kennedy told a story about Helgoth boasting about coming into $60,000 soon, half of the ransom amount. We only have Kennedy's word for this. Unfortunately, TV documentaries are made for entertainment, docutainment. They sell better if they tell a good story. Fortunately, after we exposed the Mr. X hoax, exposed what if all of this is unverified? Tracy had to be completely revamp his documentary before it could be shown in the U.S., and we never heard any more from the John San Augustine Ramsey investigator who wanted lots of money to find the mysteriously disappeared Mr. X. So if it's true, why did John Kennedy turn up at Patsy's funeral? And if that's true, why did Aunt Pam turn him away? If it's true, will he be angered by the rejection? If it's true, will he change his story? And did John Kennedy just want the reward amount or something? And he thought people would buy the fact that he was pushing this theory, even if he knew it wasn't true? Either way, Kennedy seems shady as well. Everybody seems shady here, so it's kind of impossible to make heads or tails. Also, apparently in this post by Misty from May 14th, 2004 on Web Sleuths, is stating that John Kennedy has an extensive criminal history and has permanent damage from a head injury from a car accident. What does everybody make of that, if that's true? But seemingly, both Kennedy and Gygax have a history of crimes against children and other crimes. Allegedly. Again, everything is alleged here. This is MINDSHOCK. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. These are just claims and information that have been presented that we are logically analyzing. A post from CC here. It's difficult to tell what Kennedy is in this for, but I suspect the reward. He seems to be a career two-bit criminal, and we can only expect his associations would be with same type of cons. This suggests Helgoth was one as well. The sexual offense doesn't read, in my opinion, as a child victim. It was 1979. He was 26 and was likely having a fling with a 17-year-old girl. The rest, since he spent more time out of jail than in, suggests he was into petty crap. There is doubt cast on whether or not Helgoth committed suicide, which would in some remote way suggest he was murdered because he was getting sloppy with drugs and ready to talk. If he was murdered, it would seem illogical that he knew the murderer. Perhaps his little group should be thoroughly investigated and the killer be found among them. That's a great post there, because obviously Helgoth could have been murdered, and it has nothing to do with Jonbenet Ramsey. If it wasn't a suicide and he was murdered in stages of suicide, it could have been for a different reason by other parties. And then you have a guy like Kennedy who's just trying to get reward money, possibly having a permanent brain injury of some kind. Here's a totally bizarre article here from October 25th, 2000. Rocky Mountain News, purported Ramsey investigator accused of burglary. Lafayette man charged with entering house to snatch pair of boots. Boulder. The man who provides the parents of Jonbenet Ramsey with purported evidence in their daughter's death has been arrested on burglary charges. John Edward Kennedy, 47, told officers who arrested him that he was investigating the Ramsey case. Kennedy of Lafayette last summer provided detectives working for John and Patsy Ramsey with a pair of boots he believed may have left a partial print inside the family's home, possibly by the killer. Police do not believe the boots are connected to the Ramsey case, but sent them to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for examination. Was that the last time anybody ever heard of them? Police Chief Mark Beckner said the boots belonged to a former resident of the house Kennedy is accused of burglarizing October 10th. Kennedy, when arrested, said Boulder police had authorized him to break into the home. Boulder detectives denied the claim. And if they did approve it, would they deny it after the fact? Kennedy also said he feared evidence would be lost because the house was supposed to be demolished. Police suspect Kennedy of kicking in a rear door to the home and taking with him 3 drafting quality drawings, a $54,000 check, and legal papers including a deed of trust. What? Who leaves a $54,000 check around? Diamond jewelry, several watches, and money in one bedroom were untouched, according to police reports. The home is owned by the family of a deceased man whom the Ramsey investigators have said may have been involved with the beating and strangulation of their daughter. I mean, this is just one of the most bizarre cases in history. I mean, it's just... There's so many rabbit holes, so many potential suspects and POIs. I mean, it just never ends here. And it seems like basically nobody's credible. Let's also not forget the party supposedly only a few houses away that night, including known drug dealers that J.T. Colfax brought forward from his jailhouse stories. Is it possible that Gygax or Kennedy or Helgoff were somehow connected to individuals at that party? I mean, there's a lot of criminals around there, so it's really crazy. So what does everybody make of Gygax, Helgoff, and Kennedy in this bizarre circle? And is it possible they were also connected to other individuals who may or may not have been responsible for whatever happened to Jonbenet Ramsey? I mean, was this also possibly some kind of burglary gone wrong? Maybe they thought the Ramseys weren't coming back? I mean, it's tough, too, because if they are a bunch of drug users that were at least partially out of their mind, I mean, it's really, really difficult to nail down any of these theories definitively and definitively rule any of them out without having more information, but it seems kind of weird to just write them all off completely when there are just so many coincidences lining up here. Not necessarily that they committed the crime, but that there may have been some kind of a plot, and it may have somehow connected in some way to what actually happened that night. Really weird, but believe it or not, we have way more suspects to discuss, alleged suspects anyhow, and way more rabbit holes to go down. I mean, this is truly a very, very unique case. I mean, extremely tragic, but also unique as well. There's not a lot of cases like this with this many different theories, suspects, rabbit holes, and coincidences. So that's it for now. Hope everybody found another edition of MindShock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also be a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.